Okay, so today I want to talk about something that none of us talk about openly. We rather treat it as a joke, but something that we should be taking a more serious note of. We're going to be discussing about farts or flatulence. A popular fitness coach, Dango, who I follow on Twitter, posted something that I couldn't stop thinking about. He spoke about loud versus smelly farts, and he said your gut bacteria will choose to ferment fiber over protein. And if there's no fiber, they start working on the protein, and the result is not good for you or for anyone near you. And if you're inside a lift, it's even more dangerous. He called it the protein fart problem, silent, deadly, a sign that something is off inside your gut. And I started thinking this deserves a proper biology breakdown. And I spent a few days researching, and this podcast is a result of that. So today we're going to go into the science of gas. What causes the smelly fart versus the loud odorless one or the silent odorless one? What your gut bacteria are actually doing in there? Why we need fiber? And what happens to your gut when you eat keto, high protein, but with, let's say, no plants, that is, less fiber intake. So this isn't just a gut instinct. This is your gut speaking. Let's listen. First, let's define fart. Fart or flatulence is simply a gas that has built in your digestive tract and getting expelled. Now, where does this gas come from? There are two main sources. Number one, the air we swallow, or eating fast, drinking carbonated drinks, chewing gum. So, mostly the swallowed air gets burped out, but some travels further down into the digestive system. The second part, this is kind of more interesting, due to fermentation. Your gut bacteria, trillions of them inside your large intestine, you already know all of it, are constantly breaking down the food that wasn't fully digested in your small intestine. Now, this breakdown, fermentation produces gas. So, that's your fart. Now, most fart is completely odorless. That is oxygen, nitrogen, carbon dioxide, hydrogen, methane. None of them smell of anything. So, why do some farts smell absolutely terrible? That's a question you might have. The answer is it depends on what your bacteria are fermenting and why that happens. Stay on. So, essentially, I want you to understand that farts are a report card from your gut bacteria, and we will see why. So, in this episode, we'll go deep into the biology of flatulence and what it tells you about your gut health. This is inspired by Dan Go's viral post on protein farts. So, thanks to him. We'll go into cellular level and mechanism level. By the end, I want you to understand what's happening in your colon and why it matters way beyond the smell. So, we'll cover why gut bacteria needs fiber over protein and what happens when fiber runs out or fiber is low. That's number one. Then we'll cover loud, odorless farts versus the silent, smelly ones. What's the difference? What they actually signal. We'll talk about short chain fatty acids versus branched chain fatty acids, that is SCFA versus BCFA. This is the part that Dan Go spoke about. These are the compounds your gut bacteria makes and why one heals and why one inflames. So we will look at that. We will also look at leaky gut, what that actually means at the cellular level and related to immunity. We will also talk about who the fiber that you eat is for. It's not for you, it's for the trillions of gut bacteria that's inside you. We'll also touch upon various fancy diets or different types of diets like keto, pure carnivore, or no plant diet, or extremely high protein diets, some combinations of it, and what they're doing to your microbiome. And then we'll come to the practical takeaway or a playbook, what one can do to improve digestion or improve your gut bacteria and have less smelly farts. Great. So let's start with the fiber versus the protein battle in your gut. That's the first part. So here's the core insight from Dan Go's post. Your gut bacteria has a clear preference hierarchy for the food that it wants. When fiber is available, they go for fiber first. Now, what happens when bacteria ferment fiber? They produce carbon dioxide, hydrogen, and methane. All of them are odorless. But here's the bonus. Fiber fermentation also produces something called as short chain fatty acids or SCFAs, butyrate, propionate, and acetate. These are anti-inflammatory. They actively heal your gut lining. We'll go deeper into that later. Made by the bacteria from the fiber that you eat. So fiber is its food, and they produce butyrate, propionate, acetate, short chain fatty acids. These are anti-inflammatory and required by our colon or colonocyte. So yes, fiber fermentation produces more gas, louder farts and more frequent ones, but they don't smell, and they are a sign that your microbiome is doing its duty. It's thriving. So that's good news. Now, what happens when the fiber is low? That is, the bacteria don't get its enough quantity of fiber and the protein is high. This isn't just a problem for people eating 300 grams of protein a day. The more common version, that's one among us, or probably the one who's listening to this podcast, is probably experiencing it. Normal protein intake, but chronically low fiber. Your bacteria are being starved and overwhelmed with protein. And a starving gut bacteria colony will ferment whatever it can find. In this case, it's the protein, excess protein that you consume, or the protein without fiber. When bacteria runs out of fiber, they start fermenting protein slash amino acids. This process is called putrefaction, and it produces a very different set of gases. Let's take a look at them. Hydrogen sulfide, indole, and skatole. Now, hydrogen sulfide is the rotten egg smell. Indole and skatole are the compounds found in your feces or poop. So these are gases that can clear an entire stadium and make you wonder if something has died inside of you. Sulfur containing amino acids are common in animal proteins, cysteine and methionine. When those get fermented in the colon, instead of properly digested in the small intestine, you get a sulfur factory in your gut. This is exactly what Dango experienced. High protein diet, less fiber, nowhere near the recommended 30 to 35 grams fiber a day. His gut bacteria had no fiber to eat, no fiber to work on. So they turned to protein, which is what he was consuming. So it led to silent sulfurous gas and a classic smelly protein fart. How did he fix it? He didn't reduce protein. He dramatically increased fiber. In his case, he took psyllium husks. We'll talk about alternatives later, not a problem. He added psyllium husk to his diet. Protein farts stopped. Inflammation markers also dropped. He talks about it. Digestion improved, and the bacteria also got what they preferred, and they left the protein alone. So I think now we've established the base of what is a fart, how it gets formed in general, and what happens when the gut has lesser fiber and more of protein. Now let's go to the next section, decoding the gas. We'll talk about the loud, silent, odorless, smelly ones, all of that part. So I'll give you a simple framework to read your flatulence also health signal, because it genuinely is one. Number one, the loud slash silent, odorless, frequent ones. This is the good news segment. So if you are farting heavy or silent, but it is odorless, that's the key part, you're doing fine. Your gut bacteria are fermenting the fiber well. Your microbiome is active. Gases, mostly carbon dioxide and hydrogen, odorless. More frequent can actually be a sign of a healthy, diverse gut. Don't be embarrassed, be loudly proud. My family does this a lot. Type number 2, silent, very smelly, the protein fart. This is the Dango scenario. Low fiber, high protein. Your bacteria have switched from fiber fermentation to protein putrefaction. You are producing hydrogen sulfide and sulfur compounds. This fixes always to have more fiber and not reduce the amount of protein that you consume. So you need to eat a lot of veggies, fruits, 30 to 35 grams a day of fiber you need to aim for. The third segment, extremely foul with bloating and discomfort. This can indicate gut dysbiosis, an imbalance in your gut microbiome, potentially overgrowth of a certain type of bacteria, food intolerance, or something like SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. If this is consistent, investigate beyond diet alone. Number 4, no farts at all for days or very less farts in the day. This is not a cause for celebration. This may mean constipation or slow transit time for the food to move, stool sitting in the colon for longer time, bacteria fermenting it, and producing compounds your body absorbs instead of expelling. What's the solution? More water, more fiber, more movement. On frequency, average person passes gas, whether loud or smelly, it doesn't matter. Average person produces about 12 to 25 times a day. That number may surprise most of you because most of it is silent and odorless. But this kind of frequency is normal. The question always you have to ask yourself is what kind of gas, smelly versus odorless. Being loud is actually fine. Great. Now, a lot of you might have some questions on okay, but I eat certain types of food that makes it very smelly versus I eat protein and less fiber. So, how do I differentiate? Is that a question that all of you have, which at least I had? So, let's cover the differences, nuances. Eat well, dal, sabji, onions, garlic, small onions in particular, or drumstick. I'm not doing any of this protein putrefaction thing, but my farts still smell sometimes. What is going on? Is there a question that you have? This is real and important. Now, fiber equals odorless, protein equals smelly is correct, but it is incomplete. I know. This is what I said some time back. Let's take a detailed look at it. Onions, garlics, leeks, lentils, rajma, chana, broccoli, cabbage. These foods contain specific carbohydrates your small intestine cannot literally digest. No enzyme exists for them. So they arrive in your colon, that is your large intestine, completely intact as it is. These carbohydrates, that is fructans, galacto-oligosaccharides, raffinose, fall under something called as FODMAPs. It's called FODMAPs. Your bacteria ferment them heavily and produce significant gas in this process. Your bacteria are still producing short chain fatty acids, which is good for your gut. Your gut is still being nourished, but it produces smelly type of gases. Here's the difference. Onions, garlic, cruciferous vegetables that we just discussed contains their own sulfur compounds as part of the chemical structure. Allicin in garlic, diallyl sulfide in onions, glucosinolates in broccoli and cabbage. So when the gut bacteria ferments these foods, specific foods, they again release sulfur compounds, which we discussed in the previous segment, as a byproduct, which is expected to smell. The smell here is not coming from protein putrefaction. It is coming from the vegetable itself. So that's the nuance you need to understand. So now there are two different smell pathways, right? Protein putrefaction. The other one is good food. These are good for you. They produce short chain fatty acids, which are good for your colon and your body. But they produce smelly gases, which is expected because they contain sulfur compounds in their chemistry. So how do you tell them apart? Like let's say you are producing smelly farts. Now, how do you know which use case you belong to? Now, look for consistency or a pattern. Pathway 1, that is your protein, is your baseline. It's present across days, across meals, regardless of what you specifically ate. It's chronic, low grade, and persistent. In this case, it's a protein putrefaction pathway. Pathway 2, that is your, let's say, small onions, garlics pathway. It is meal specific and episodic. You ate the onion heavy sabji today, or you had the sambar. 3 hours later, it shows up, but the next morning you're back to normal. Then that's your meal specific smelly gas. So in this case, you don't have to worry. The person eating clean, dal, sabji, good protein, vegetables, and occasionally getting pungent gas after a garlicky meal is not the same person as the person running on high protein, low fiber diet. This one is normal. In fact, it is healthy. One is the gut working hard on good food. The other is the gut sending SOS signal. Great. Now that we have covered the difference between the types of gas, which is protein smelly gas versus vegetables that produce smelly farts, let's go into the next segment, which is called as a leaky gut. What that actually means. This is very important, so just stay on. Because this is not about just smell versus social embarrassment. The type of fermentation happening in your gut has real serious downstream consequences. So let's take a look at it. Dango said something specific in his post that's worth unpacking now. He said protein fermentation produces branched chain fatty acids, that is BCFA, which I mentioned a few minutes ago. instead of short chain fatty acids. BCFAs and hydrogen sulfide, which are the outputs of protein putrefaction, are linked to inflammation and increased intestinal permeability. Hang on, we'll cover that. Let's break it down. The fiber world produces SCFAs, that is short chain fatty acids. When bacteria ferment fiber, they produce short chain fatty acids like butyrate, propionate, acetate. These are not waste products. These are signals and fuel for your body. Butyrate is the primary fuel for your colonocytes. I'll repeat, butyrate is your primary fuel for colonocytes. These are the cells that are lining your colon. These are anti-inflammatory, strengthens your gut wall. This is the gut literally healing and fortifying itself from inside using what you fed your bacteria. So if I have to just explain it, imagine your gut lining with colonocytes as a single layer of cells. And now these cells are tied together or fitted together, like how your tiles are, the grout between the tiles, right? Now you want them to stay as intact as possible, and we'll look at it why. And when you eat fiber and it produces SCFAs, they help these intestinal walls or the gut walls maintain intact and kind of its nourishment for them. Let's take a look at the other one, protein world instead of the fiber world, BCFAs. When bacteria ferment protein instead of fiber, they produce BCFAs or branched chain fatty acids. It's a different structure and has a very different effect. BCFAs don't feed or repair the colonocytes like SCFAs do. And alongside BCFAs, when this hydrogen sulfide is produced, at high concentrations, it is cytotoxic. Again, I'll mention the word, it is cytotoxic. It damages the very cells it should be feeding. So fiber-rich foods produces SCFAs, your butyrates, propionates, acetates, which are healthy and feeding or repairing your colonocytes, whereas BCFAs / hydrogen sulfide, when they are produced using protein putrefaction, at high concentrations, it is cytotoxic. It damages the very cells it should be feeding. So you have a double hit. Your colonocytes, your cells in the gut, are being damaged by the sulfide and not being repaired by the butyrate. Double whammy, the gut wall weakens. Now, this is where we are going to talk about the leaky gut. Let's take a deeper look at it. Your intestinal wall is a single layer of cells. I just mentioned colonocytes, just one cell thick, which means it's extremely thin. These cells are packed together, held in place by a protein called tight junctions. Nice name. It lets through the digested nutrients, amino acids, fatty acids, glucose, and vitamins. It keeps out bacteria, bacterial remnants and toxins, undigested food particles / waste compounds. Your bloodstream is supposed to receive clean, processed nutrients, not raw gut contents. So when BCFAs and hydrogen sulfide damage these tight junctions, the grouts between the cells, the seal loosens. Right? Imagine a sealant between the cells. Right? Gaps open between the cells. Things that were never meant to cross start crossing. Bacterial fragments, lipopolysaccharides, LPS, remember this name, lipopolysaccharides / LPS, the outer wall of certain bacteria, these are extremely inflammatory. Undigested food particles, these cross the cells and hit your immune system or activate your immune system, or they flow into the bloodstream. This immune system is just patrolling just on the other side of the wall, by the way. Your immune system has never seen these compounds in the bloodstream. It treats them as invaders. It starts firing. Now, this kind of explains your leaky gut. I hope you understand this very clearly. Now, the response is inflammation, systemic. And you understand why it is systemic, right? Because this blood can flow all over your body. Low grade chronic inflammation. So, this is the result of a leaky gut. So, the farts are just an indication. There could be serious downstream effects. Now, why this matters beyond your gut, I'll just touch upon at a high level, because I'll do a separate podcast on leaky gut and what all possibilities exist or downstream effects that can happen. I'll just touch upon at a high level. Because the inflammation doesn't stay local, it becomes systemic, it circulates. Chronic low-grade systemic inflammation is now linked to enormous range of conditions. Insulin resistance and blood sugar dysregulation. autoimmune conditions. The immune system, which is already on a high alert, starts misidentifying the body's own tissues and attacking them. This is the autoimmune disease. Brain fog, mood issues, gut brain axis carries inflammatory signals upwards. Joint inflammation, skin conditions like eczema, psoriasis, rashes, etc. Cardiovascular markers as well. Now, the effect of how it reflects for different people is different. So, I'll cover that as part of leaky gut effects in a separate podcast. The gut wall is your firewall between gut contents and your bloodstream. Imagine the gut wall. This is your gut contents. The other side is your bloodstream. Now, the minute bad particles or rogue particles enters your bloodstream due to leaky gut, you have inflammation and severe effects across different organs or different parts of your body. When it leaks, you're not just getting gut problems, you're getting an immune system that's been handed a list of targets and sent everywhere. Now, this immune system is not clearly prepared to handle these kind of targets. Where the damage shows up depends on your genetics, your existing vulnerabilities, and how long the leak has been going. None of these announce as gut problems. They show up as fatigue, brain fog, etc. months or years after the gut dysbiosis started. You are never able to connect it. But imagine some issues that came on your skin, on your leg, on your bone, your joint, or your heart. You were never able to account it because this is happening over a long period of time and you could never connect it to the gut issues or dysbiosis that you had. Now, to summarize this segment, Dan Go's inflammation markers dropped. He actually mentioned that when he fixed his fiber, he wasn't just stopping smelly farts. He was changing what his gut was producing at a cellular level. From BCFAs and hydrogen sulfide, which are inflammatory by nature, to SCFAs, which the fiber produces, that is your SCFA/butyrate. From a leaky, inflamed gut to a sealed, well-sealed, nourished one. So I hope you understand at a cellular level what happens when your firewall is weak and the sealants are damaged and your colonocytes become damaged. So that's the difference between a damaged leaky gut versus a healthy productive gut. You must be having a lot of questions now. But protein is good for me. Why is digesting protein or putrefaction damaging my gut? Let's take a deeper look at it. Why is the body that is designed for consuming protein, it's good for your muscle repair, hormones, growth, everything, then why is the body designed in such a way that eating it is causing inflammation? That's a question that I had. It doesn't make evolutionary sense, isn't it? Why would fiber be mandatory in that case? You're right, this needs a reframe because protein is not the villain here, the location is. So let's take a deeper look at it. Now imagine a two-stage digestive process. I think once you understand this, you will also understand what the role of the bacteria is in the colon and how they started behaving evolutionarily. Your body is brilliantly designed to handle protein, so no concerns on that. Every cell, every enzyme, every hormone is built from it. The design is quite elegant. Stage 1, your small intestine. This is your precision assembly line. It handles protein beautifully. Enzymes break it down into amino acids. It gets absorbed into the bloodstream, sent exactly where it needs to go. Clean, efficient, no gas, no smell. This is your intended pathway or behavior. Stage number 2, large intestine. This is your composting unit or the food that was left over or wasn't able to be digested in the small intestine came to stage number 2. Designed to work where stage 1 couldn't process, which is primarily fiber. Bacteria were never meant to handle significant amounts of protein. That's not their job. So basically, excess protein and stuff that wasn't digested in stage 1 flows down to stage 2. But all the fiber almost flows down only to stage 2 because fiber cannot be digested in your small intestine, has to be necessarily digested in large intestine or your colon. The problem arises when more protein reaches stage 2 due to multiple reasons. If more protein reaches stage 2, then stage 1 can handle. They ferment whatever substrate is available. And the byproducts of protein fermentation are toxic. We just saw that before. Rather than nourishing. Same workforce, wrong raw material. So this bacteria in your colon is designed to eat or ferment fiber. But when you feed it protein, which somehow flowed from your small intestine to your large intestine, it starts working on it instead. But the result is your damaging components, which we saw just a few minutes ago. Now, Why does protein leak into stage 2? I'll just cover it at a high level. We won't go too deep into that. A few reasons. Very high protein volume. The small intestine has a throughput limit. Fast gut motility, that is, the food moved really fast. Food doesn't spend enough time in the small intestine for complete enzymatic breakdown. Low stomach acid or poor enzyme production. These can happen due to multiple reasons, so we will not touch upon that. They reduce how much protein gets processed before it moves on to the next segment, that is your large intestine. And this is another key part that you should remember. If this flow has very less fiber, it's even more damaging, and I'll tell you why. No fiber, fiber slows the transit. So fiber slows down digestion. So if there is no fiber, the motility or the movement of food is much faster. Fiber slows the movement of food through the small intestine, giving enzymes more contact time with protein to break it down and digest them. Without fiber, food moves faster, less protein gets absorbed, and more reaches the next stage, that is your colon. Fiber isn't really mandatory because someone suddenly decided and said, oh, you have to eat fiber. It's a design assumption due to evolution. So we'll take a look at that part as well. For almost the entire history of human existence, fiber was unavoidable. You couldn't eat protein without fiber coming along with it. Hang on. Hunt an animal, you eat it with wild roots, tubers, berries, and leaves. Every meal was naturally bundled. The gut microbiome evolved over hundreds and thousands of years in that fiber-rich environment. The entire architecture, bacterial species, fermentation pathways, SCFA production, colonocyte nutrition was calibrated to a diet where fiber was the dominant substrate reaching the colon. So it was assumed through years of evolution that fiber would reach your large intestine. Fiber being essential is not a design flaw, it is a design assumption. The body assumed fiber would always be there because 99% of the human history that was the case. Now, what's new? Why are we seeing new problems today? Because we now have the ability to eat concentrated protein with almost zero fiber. A lot of your protein supplements, protein powder, steak with no vegetables, high protein processed food. The gut microbiome has no time to adapt. It's not broken, it is encountering a new situation that it is not used to because it was never designed for it. So you don't eat the fiber for yourself. I want you to understand this. This fiber is for your 38 or 40 trillion organisms, bacteria living inside your large intestine. They do something you can't. That is break down the fiber. And in return, what do? They produce compounds, your SCFAs, butyrate, to keep your gut sealed, your immune system calibrated, and your inflammation low. Fiber is the salary that you pay them for doing this work. And if you stop paying them, they will find some other work you really don't want them to be doing. Okay, great. So now I think I've established leaky gut. We've also explained why fiber was essential, what's the evolutionary need of it. Now I want to speak a little bit to people who are on, let's say, different types of diet, who are on a keto, extremely high protein plus pure carnivore kind of a diet. What can potentially happen? I know this is unsettled or the research is still going on. People don't necessarily agree on this, but I will still cover because we established a lot of bases here, and I think it's very important. If protein reaches the colon without fiber, causes this cascade of sulfide, leaky gut, inflammation, BCFS. We already covered it. But what about diet which is specifically low carb, low fiber, and high protein? Keto/carnivore, right? Let's take a look at it. Pure non-vegetarian. What is happening inside those guts? The risk is real, but it's not inevitable. Let's take a look at a few use cases. Keto by design eliminates most carbohydrates, including fiber-rich ones. Fruits, legumes, whole grains, most root vegetables, all restricted. What remains predominantly fat and protein. The colon receives very little fermentable substrate. Bacteria, which is starved of fiber, shift towards protein putrefaction. BCFAs, hydrogen sulfide, the leaky gut pathway. But not all keto is the same. A well-formulated ketogenic diet, the way it was originally designed clinically, includes significant above-ground vegetables, leafy greens, broccoli, cauliflower, zucchini, spinach, etc. Low in digestible carbohydrates because keto by nature reduces carbohydrates or almost eliminates them. Low in digestible carbohydrates, but very high in fiber. Someone doing this kind of a diet would still get about maybe 20 to 25 grams of fiber daily. Not ideal, but not catastrophic either. But today, the keto that most people do, I don't know, due to influences or reading something on the internet that, we were essentially carnivores of the past, so we can live eating only animals. Heavy cream, butter, bacon, cheese, minimal vegetables, or let's say no vegetables. This version will have genuinely low fiber intake and they have a very high chance of high inflammation and leaky gut, whatever we discussed in the previous section. That is high protein, low fiber diet. The risk is quite real. Now let's go to the extreme use case. Carnivore gang. I don't like plants, vegetables, fruits. Pure carnivore is the most aggressive version of this experiment. Zero fiber, complete reliance on protein and fats. Colon bacteria have nothing but protein to ferment. Interestingly, some carnivore dieters report less bloating and gas, which makes sense. I'll tell you why. Because with almost no fermentation happening, there is less gas production overall. So they interpret this as their gut improving, which is not the case. This is where the logic is flawed. It means the microbiome is starved into inactivity. So when they are inactive, there's nothing to produce. A quiet gut isn't always a healthy gut, it may be a depleted one. The studies that do exist on long-term carnivore diet show significant reduction in microbiome diversity, near elimination of certain bacterial species, and reduced butyrate production. So there is a real risk of this. Now, the evolutionary paradox, we want to discuss this part as well, right? Ketosis itself is a natural state. Humans evolved to enter ketosis during food scarcity, fasting, and winter. The body handles it fine metabolically, but even during this periods of food scarcity in hunter-gatherer populations, plant foods were still being consumed to an extent. Roots, tubers, leaves, seeds. The fiber never dropped to zero in the evolutionary environment. The gut microbiome never experienced true zero fiber conditions until the modern carnivore diet modified it or invented it. These two things got bundled together in modern keto and treated as one package. Evolutionarily, these are completely separate. So now that we have established what happens to people who eat pure carnivore or high protein, very low fiber foods, kind of they run a little bit of risk. I just thought I'll call that out. Okay, what's the honest take here? Keto and high protein diets are not inherently bad. They're good. Some people do genuinely well on them. Metabolic improvements, weight loss, blood sugar control, these are all real. But most versions carry a gut microbiome cost that doesn't show up immediately. The inflammation doesn't announce itself as the gut problem. It shows up 6 months or even 2 years later as fatigue, skin issues, joint inflammations, brain fog, etc. And nobody can connect it back to the diet that depleted their microbiome. The people who do best, if you're a keto person, so I'll just summarize this for you. The people who do best on keto long term actually obsess over vegetable intake within carb limits. They treat fiber as a non-negotiable even within the keto framework. Keto can be a legitimate metabolic tool, but most people doing keto are accidentally running a microbiome depletion environment experiment and they won't know the results for years. Now it's time to go into the next segment. A lot of people might then ask, should my fart always be loud or is it okay if it is silent but odorless? So let's take a look at a few use cases here. The loudness is just a mechanical thing. I'll explain how that comes. Fiber fermentation produces a high volume of gas. We already covered it. Your bacteria are actively working and the byproduct is a lot of gas building up in the large intestine. When that volume exits through the anal sphincter, it does under a lot of pressure. The sphincter vibrates. That vibration is the sound that you hear. When there is a letting out of air really fast, boom, you get the full effect. Protein putrefaction produces trace amount of gas, not so much. but those trace gases are extremely potent. Hydrogen sulfide is detectable by human nose at concentrations as low as a few parts per billion. Tiny volume, low pressure, slips out silently, like that balloon example. But the impact is unforgettable. Now, sound is a proxy for volume. More gas, more pressure, more sound. And more odorless gas means more fiber fermentation activity, and which means your microbiome is in a good condition. Now, there is an important nuance I want you to understand. The same gas can exit loudly or quietly depending on the sphincter tone, your body position, sitting, standing, running, etc., or how relaxed you are, or if you're able to manually control it. A quiet, odorless fart is equally fine, no concerns. The one to watch for is the silent, smelly one. Now, smelly is the only keyword that you need to remember. The silent or the loud one is not a problem, regardless of decibels. Coming to the final segment, we've covered a lot of science, a lot of biology, a lot of history, evolution. Now, what should I do if I'm having smelly farts? Great. Let's look at the practical playbook. Number one, hit 30 grams of fiber a day minimum. This is what Dango also strongly recommends, 30 to 35 grams of fiber a day. Most people on a typical Indian diet, especially if it's higher protein or restaurant heavy, are probably getting about 10 to 15 grams at best. Fiber, I'm talking about that. The target is 30 to 35 grams. So what do you need to do? Dal, rajma, chickpeas, vegetables, fruits, whole grains, seeds, start here. Your kitchen actually has everything of it. And if you need to top up, what Dango recommends is a psyllium husk. It's also called in Indian language, Hindi and Tamil. It's called isabgol. 1 teaspoon in water, 3-4 grams of fiber instantly. Point number two. If you're in this high protein, low fiber zone or a gang and you're looking to improve after hearing this podcast, don't dump fiber all at once. Go from low fiber to high fiber suddenly means your bacteria are going into overdrive. Very uncomfortable and not good. Increase them gradually over the next 2 to 3 weeks. Let the microbiome adapt to increased fiber. Eat diverse plants. Diversity of plant foods is one of the strongest predictors of microbiome diversity. 30 different plants a week sounds like a lot. It is not. Spices, herbs, different vegetables, all of them count. A tadka with mustard seeds, curry leaves and turmeric is already 3. Next point, don't reduce the protein. Protein is not a villain. Again, I'm saying that protein is good, but you need to pair it with good fiber. If you're doing body recomposition, like building muscles, hitting 1.6 to 2 grams of protein per kg, don't back off from protein. You need that. Just make sure fiber is tracked alongside the protein. You make sure you need to marry them as soon as possible so that they go hand in hand. Low fiber plus high protein is the problem, not high protein itself. Remember that. The next use case, if you're on a keto, protect your fiber. Vegetables within your carb limits, that is, vegetables with low carb but gives you sufficient fiber, go for it. Broccoli, cauliflower, zucchini, spinach, we already covered it. Leafy greens, etc. Don't use carb restriction as an excuse to eliminate fiber. Your microbiome need it even if you don't want. And the last point, watch out for these protein supplement additives. People who are on protein supplements, I know a lot of you are. A lot of protein powders contains artificial sweeteners, sorbitol, erythritol, and emulsifiers that are very hard to digest and add to gas and bloating. If you're using whey or plant protein and have GI issues, look at the ingredient list, be a little careful. Now, that's pretty much it. Hope this explains the science behind your farts and a bit of gut and some evolution. Your gut bacteria have lived with you your entire life. They've evolved alongside you based on the food that you've eaten. They have only one ask, variety and fiber, 30 to 35 grams a day. That's about it. That's a salary you need to pay them every single day. Give them that and they give you back a wonderful sealed gut with beautiful colonocytes, low inflammation and peaceful digestion, and good loud farts or silent ones if you are of that type. They don't ask for much, 38 trillion of them. But if you make them unhappy, they will find ways to tell you in terms of smelly farts. So eat your fiber, your gut will thank you, and so will people around you. I'll see you next week.